Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. How are we? Good. Okay. I'm guessing the people who said good didn't go to the after party. Hands up if you went to the after party. Oh, and you're still here. Well done. Well,
it's been tough this morning.
It has been tough. Congratulations to all those who made it here this morning. Just before I start my talk, I just want to say one quick thing. You'll see people in these green shirts. They're the volunteers and the organisers of WordCamp. And please, please, please go up and thank them sometime today because they have done an amazing job. Especially the organisers have put in hundreds of hours by themselves to get this WordCamp to happen, and they do it all for no other reason but the love for WordPress and WordCamp. So go up, give them, shake their hand, congratulate them. If you're really game, give them a hug. Some of them might like that, some of them might, ooh. Anyway, look, just say thanks. It's really, it means a lot to them. And the volunteers have been absolutely amazing and helped everybody out. So, yeah, just do that. Thank you. Okay, let me kick it off. The Hosting Survival Guide. Now, a little bit about me. I used to be a web developer. I still am, kind of. I do a lot of work with meetups and organising WordCamps, and I'm really, really bad at sports. I'm a true nerd. Don't watch football. Can't catch a ball. That's pretty much me. I live in Brisbane. So, thanks, one person. And about 2.5 years ago, I went over to the dark side and joined WP Engine and working in the hosting space. So that's really interesting. So when I was in web design, I didn't really think a lot about hosting. I just thought, well, that's their job, and you pay them a bit of money, and you whinged about if you had to pay too much. Yeah. But being on the other side of the fence, I learnt a lot, and this is where this talk came from. It's all my learnings, kind of having the web developer mindset, but kind of explaining why you need to pay a bit more attention to your hosting. So let's get started. In the beginning, it was very simple. Who remembers the heady days of HTML and CSS and typing everything out on Notepad? Yeah, that was so good, wasn't it? Yeah. And what you really didn't have to know a lot about hosting. All you had to do was have somewhere to put your website. There wasn't a lot to it. And the websites were amazing. Oh, weren't they good? Man, that was like a $20,000 website. Look at the buttons. Oh. So, but then we had CMSs come along. And that just changed things completely, because it just added a whole heap of complexity. Yeah. So, there's a lot more to it now. Like the HTML, CSS, it's just so easy. But yeah, with all this new stuff coming out and things advancing, it's getting more and more confusing. And here's some top state-of-the-art. It looks a little bit like the CSIRO picture we had up. State-of-the-art web hosting there. So yeah. The idea of a web host, everybody knows what web hosting is. You have to, because you've got a website and you've got to host it somewhere. And that's the common thread with everybody in this room who's got a website, is you've got to host it somewhere. So getting good hosting, knowing what your hosting is very vital. So let's find out what we need from hosting today. First of all, you need infrastructure. No matter what, it all comes back to infrastructure. It comes back to a big box of diodes and capacitors and flashing lights. Oh, this one flashed 3 times, woohoo. So that's what it kind of looks like. That's a server box. Now, a lot of people think when they're buying hosting, they're getting one whole thing of that. No. It's amazing how many people think that's what they're getting. In reality, you're getting this. And even to a lesser point, you're getting probably a little tiny bit of one of those all blue boxes, depending on what kind of hosting you've got. So let's look into it. The other thing we've got is GUIs. So everybody knows, probably heard of cPanel. Some of you probably heard of Plesk. If you've talked to the guys out in Kinetics on the Plesk out there, you've probably talked to them. I've used Plesk, it's really good. And then you've got things like custom proprietary systems. So there's a lot of hosting companies now who are building their own GUIs into the server architecture. and it's a lot more streamlined. It's especially with the WordPress specific hosts, it's all kind of refined down to WordPress, which is really handy. And then you'll see all these plans. Has everybody seen these plans on the website pages? And everybody knows what they mean, don't they? Yeah. So shared. Let's start with shared. That's obviously the cheapest and it's the one that most people go for. This is what shared hosting is. So when you're traveling, you go and traveling across Europe. If you're just come out of uni and you've saved up some money from McDonald's and you're going to Europe for a year and you're going to backpack, this is probably where you're going to stay. Now, why are you going to stay there? It's cheap. It's social. And it's social, and it's fun. Can you leave a bag with your laptop sitting there for 2 days? No. Can you get to the bathroom anytime you want? Probably not. So shared hosting is kind of like this. When you saw that little picture with the server architecture, it's all broken up, well, one of those little blue boxes was like basically a hostel. You're sharing the resources. And because you're sharing the resources, you get it a lot cheaper. So instead of one person being in that room, they can get 20 people in that room. And it makes the cost for the hotel cheaper, makes the cost for you cheaper, but you have to make some kind of, you've got to make some adjustments. And you can't exactly expect a top-class service. But if you've got a website and you are not generating any income from it, this is probably what you need. You need something cheap. You need something that can get your site up and do the job. Then you probably heard about dedicated or VPS hosting, so virtual private servers. So that's a bit more like this. So when you're traveling with your business, you're not going to stay in a hostel. So you're working for a big company and they're sending you on a trip somewhere, business trip. They're not going to, hopefully, they're not going to put you in a hostel. They're going to want you to be productive. They want you to be able to work. If you've got to work and do some work in the hotel and meet clients, they don't want you up all night partying. They don't want you, people stealing your work laptop and stuff. So they will put you in somewhere nice. They want to look after you.
One of your rooms that you stay in?
I wish. I'm probably still in the hostel, but no, I do stay in nice places. And it's important because I have to work during the day. And this is the same for your website. If your website has got a purpose, if you're generating income from that website, you don't want to be sharing resources. You don't want to be, cutting corners. You want to have a good experience. And this is the idea of dedicated hosting. The idea is that it's more of a business class environment. And it gives you, you've got the bathroom. You can use the bathroom whenever you like. You can get room service. It's really good. You can sometimes charge that room service to the company if you're clever. Then we've got managed hosting. Who's seen the managed hosting? And specifically, you see a lot of WordPress managed hosting now. Now, I wanted to keep the theme of the hotel rooms going, but I couldn't quite do that. It had to come to this. This is what managed hosting is like. And it's more like a pit crew. So imagine you're in a car. So imagine you're the driver of that car. Are you worried about how much air is in the tyres? Are you worried about how much, how the fuel, putting fuel in the tank? No, you're worried about one thing and one thing only, winning the race. And that's where managed hosting comes in. You want to be in the driver's seat, focused on one thing, your business, your website, whatever it is. The rest of that crew, they're the ones who are looking at the tyres saying, yeah, we need to change that tyre, we need to add some more fuel, we need to, make the wing a little bit lower. They're the crew that are doing everything that they can to make your experience better. And that's what managed hosting should be. Then, of course, all this should be pretty much this day and age in cloud hosting, which means you're not locked down to a specific server. Even though you're still residing on hardware, it's not out in the cloud. It's not actually physically in a cloud somewhere floating around. Even though Google tried to tell us that a couple of years ago in one of their April Fool's jokes. It is actually, the idea of cloud hosting is the availability to be on infrastructure, but be able to change and move very easily. So it can be it's basically backed up somewhere and can be easily moved to another piece of hardware very easily. Or it could be replicated across multiple pieces of hardware as well. There's different kind of ways you can do it, but the main thing is it's not locked down to one physical. So if one physical server goes down, you don't lose your site, basically. Well, hopefully not. Another thing we've got to look at is location. This is becoming more and more important this day and age. There was a time people didn't care where their website was hosted, as long as it was hosted. It was, it's World Wide Web, it doesn't matter. But now it really does, especially depending on your target audience. So this is a map of the sub-cables across the world, the ones that are under the water, which connect all the different countries. So if you imagine you're hosting in America, it's got to go through a lot of different cables, different ports to get to Australia. And even more so, like, look in Asia, there's all sorts of little nodes and little bits that it has to go through. And each one of those creates latency to your signal. And that affects your first time to byte. So I did a little test. There's a little website called 2019.sydney.wordcamp.org. And I did a little speed test, and I tested it from Australia. Now, with the WordPress websites, the WordCamp websites, they're given to us by WordCamp Central, and they're hosted somewhere in America. So the first time the byte here was 1.189 seconds for the WordCamp Sydney website, tested from Sydney. Now, if we test that same site from America, we actually drop about 0.3 of a second on the first time to byte, which isn't a lot. It's like 0.3 of a second, you can scratch your arm in 0.3 of a second. But if you have a look at the compound between the total load speed from Sydney, which was 6.131 seconds, to America, which is 5.13, it's nearly a second impact on the load speed. So if you are targeting an audience, and speed is important, every second you can get off your website load speed helps with SEO, helps with customer experience. So if your target audience is in Australia and you're hosting in America or Taiwan or Russia or anywhere else, you're going to incur that little bit of first time to byte and that will compound on your total load speed. So getting a location close to where your target audience is going to help. By the same token, if you've got a worldwide audience, the location might not be as important. You might look and see where the majority of your audience is and pick somewhere close to that. But you can also use something like a CDN to use the edge nodes and serve up static files a lot quicker and faster to different regions. But really think about where your target audience is. And sometimes I come across companies that are in Australia and they think, oh, I want an Australian web data center, and then it turns out that their target audience is actually in America or another country. So it's better to have a server that's close to your target audience. Availability is another. Everybody wants their website to be available all the time. So server uptime is very important. And you'll also see on the web pages for the hosts that there'll be SLA or an uptime of 99.99% or something around that. Now, it's important to note is that's not an absolute guarantee that it will be up. That's what they're trying to guarantee, that it will be up. If it can actually be down for certain amounts of time. And if everybody reads their terms and conditions, I'm sure everybody does, what it means is if it goes down below that time, they will compensate you. Not a lot, it'll probably be a percentage of your monthly bill. Now, if your site's down for 10 hours and you lose $20,000 worth of business, you're not going to get compensated $20,000 unless you've got some really cool agreement with them. What you'll get is a percentage of your plan, but you have to monitor that. They're not going to come and tell you, so you've got to monitor it. So what's it actually look like? At 99.9%, you're allowed to have a 1 minute and 26-second downtime per day, or up to 8 hours and 45 minutes a year. That's not a lot. Once again, they're not guaranteeing, they're not saying this will absolutely be up this amount of time. What they're saying is we'll try and make it up, have it up that much. But
That's not including the maintenance times?
well, that should include the maintenance times. There will be, a lot of times there'll be something that will tell you we will have X amount of maintenance time, which won't be counted. Some won't, so you need to read the fine print. So that's at 99.9%. What if we went to 99.99? That brings it to 8.6 seconds or 52 minutes a year. So if you look at those two together, that's a difference of 0.09%. But that's a huge difference in what you actually get. Once again, you need to check. So using Pingdom or Uptime Robot, you can actually keep a track of it. So if you see your website's been down for a couple of hours, it's at that stage you need to reach out to your hosting company, ask them what's going on, and then see if you can get some compensation. They're not going to come and tell you. Believe you me. Another thing to look at is security. Yeah, I love that picture. I could watch this for hours. Has anybody seen the security report that comes out every year? Security does a little survey every year. Researches all the most hacked sites. WordPress, 90% and increasing every year. So every year it's been a little bit more. Does that mean that WordPress is the most insecure platform on the planet? No. If we look at the popularity, this is the market share of WordPress up against some of its competitors like Joomla, Drupal. So like Drupal, something around 1.9%. WordPress is up around, these are old stats. I think we're currently at 34, 35%. I think at this stage it was 32%. It's like if you've got 1 million Commodores out there and 2 Bugattis, and they say, well, 60% of the Commodores were stolen last year, but no Bugattis. Does that mean Bugatti's more secure? Not really. It just means that we've got a lot more Commodores out in the road. So the main reason that a lot of these sites got hacked was not because WordPress was insecure, it's because of outdated software, plugins are not updated, themes not updated, WordPress core's not updated, even down to the infrastructure layer, so PHP, things like that not being updated, as well as social hacking and different ways that people can get into your sites. So really, it just comes down to making sure that your hosting environment's nice, safe and secure, that their software's up to date, and also things like SSL. So who's got an SSL on their site? Who hasn't? Yeah, there's a couple of people. There was a time we didn't really think about SSLs unless you had an e-com site. It really wasn't necessary. But then Google came along and said, hey, we're going to mark you down if you don't have an SSL. So everybody wanted one then. So now just about everybody has an SSL. And then, of course, they brought out Let's Encrypt, which makes it free to do it. So anyone know the difference between Let's Encrypt, the free version of SSL, and the paid version? It's about $120 a year. That's the difference. Pretty much. There's not much difference in it. It's exactly the same SSL certificate. And most hosts these days, most of the good hosts, will have this as part of their plan. So look for hosts that will actually give you a free SSL. I've still got a hosting company, which I won't mention. It rings me about every 2 months and says, oh, do you want to buy an SSL? It's only like $120 a year. I said, can you put a free Let's Encrypt on? They go, we'll get back to you on that. So look for a host that will give you that for free. A Let's Encrypt one will expire every 3 months, but a good host will have a script in place that will renew it.
Sorry, so you have SSL plus Let's Encrypt? You have to have them both? Or?
No, Let's Encrypt is S and SNL. Yeah, so definitely look for that. Also be aware, I did have some people tell me that SSL makes, I can't get hacked because I've got an SSL. SSL won't stop you from being hacked. It'll encrypt the transmission between the server and the browser. But you still need to Do all your normal security things. Make sure you use strong passwords. Make sure you don't give out any information. Keep your software up to date. That's really important. Maintenance. We've got to keep everything maintained these days. That's one of the complexities. It's a constant, it's like your car. You've got to keep your car maintained. If you don't, it's going to break down or someone's going to break into it. Backups. Has everybody got backups of their site? How many people have tested their backup? There's an old saying, if you haven't tested your backup, you don't have one. Now, a lot of hosting companies nowadays will include backing up a backup service into their plans. And this is really good. I mean, there's a lot of plugins out there that'll do it, but it's nice to have something that's going to, sometimes you want 2 or 3 kinds of backups. One thing to be aware of, there are hosting companies out there that says, we back up your site. What they really mean is they're backing up their site for them. So if their server goes down, they can back up the entire, everybody's account. When you have a problem and you ring them up and say, can I get a backup of my site? They're going to say, sorry, that's just for us. So make sure that you've got a backup that is through the system. You want to back up, sometimes you want to back up every day, but at least back up whenever you do an update or change anything on your site. And see if it's easy to restore as well. Some things are a lot easier. Some of the hosting companies, you can do a one-click restore of your site. Sometimes it's a little bit more complex. Staging sites are really important. So this is becoming more normal across hosting companies now too. You can have a staging environment. And the beauty of this is, if you want to do updates, if you want to do changes on your site, you can do it in a safe environment, not on your live site. So we'll basically take a copy of your site. You can do your updates, your plugin updates, theme updates, change bits of code, and then push it up to your live site. Just be aware, though, when you do this, it does make a complete copy of your site. So if you're on a plan that's limited in, say, disk space, and you've got, say, 30 gig of disk space allowed on your plan, and you're using, say, 20 on your live site, when you back it up, it's going to back up the entire site, so it'll be 40 gig. So just be aware of that. But this is very important for doing your updates and not, nobody wants to test things out on their live site. Support. Now, support is very important. You never know how important it is till you need it. So, 24/7 support if you can get it. In this day and age, it's becoming more and more common, but a lot of, especially smaller local companies, don't always provide 24/7 support. The support's amazing, but they might just do that support while they're in the office, in office hours. Sometimes outside of that, they'll have ticketing systems. Ticketing systems I find are really, really bad. So if you can get chat and phone support, that's really good. The ticketing system usually means you type in, I've got a problem, and an hour later you'll get back, what's your problem? And then another hour it's like, have you tried turning it off and on again? And it can be 6, 7, 12 hours before you get an answer. So being able to just chat to somebody, whether it's on the phone or live chat, is really handy. If they've got WordPress knowledge, it's always good. So a lot of hosting companies, they service everything. That's why a lot of people are going to the WordPress specific host now, because they have got WordPress knowledge. And they will support the application, which is WordPress, as well as the infrastructure. Otherwise, when you ring up and you say, hey, my website's down, they'll say, well, the server's up. If the website's down, that's your problem. So knowing the difference between infrastructure support and WordPress support is important. And if it's free, that's good too. Some hosting companies still charge for support. You don't want to be paying for that. Budget's important when you're hosting. Everybody has a budget. I don't think I've met anybody yet who's said to me, I don't care what it costs, just do it. Budget is really important because you need to get what you're paying for. I love that picture. There's always companies wanting to do it cheaper, but what are you getting for that cheaper price? Quite often I've seen companies will say unlimited bandwidth, unlimited disk space, unlimited this. Has anybody ever seen that episode of The Simpsons where Homer Simpson goes to the buffet? Yeah. And it's all you can eat. But he ate everything. So you normally see on those unlimited bandwidth, fair use policy. which means it's unlimited to like maybe 10 gig. Make sure you get what you're paying for. And if your site is generating income, make sure you're paying for what you need. If you've got a cat blog or a little hobby site and you're not generating any money, budget hosting is probably what you need. But if you're generating an income, if your website is a core part of your business, the $5 hosting probably isn't what you want. You want something that's going to be resilient, be able to grow with you, and you need a company that can partner with you to make sure that your website's up and performant. Speaking about performance, let's have a look into that. Quick question. Which car is quickest? One for 1.6 litre motor or one for 4.5 litre motor? What do you reckon? Depends. 1.6, 4.5. Who thinks 4.5? Who thinks 1.6? Who just doesn't care? It's just a car. Just want to drive it. So what if the 1.6 litre motor was in a Ferrari and the 4.5 litre was in a Land Rover? Which one's quickest? The Ferrari? Yeah? Yeah. Well, you think that. What if they're in a race and the race is cross-country? Which one's going to win? Yeah. So what happens is, this is what happens in the hosting world. You've got, if you look on the hosting pages, they'll say 4 cores, 16 gig of memory, 200 gig disk space, and people just look at those numbers and go, well, this one's got more than that one. This is the one I want because this is more. But is it? You know? That 4-core processor, how old is that 4-core processor? Yeah. Do you need more memory? Do you need more disk space? Do you need more bandwidth? What do you need? So these are the questions you need to ask. Don't just simply look at a web hosting thing and think, well, this one's cheaper, I'll go for this, or this one's got more memory, or this one's... Look into what your actual website needs. There's a lot of tools out there you can help to figure out what you need and keep track of what your website's doing. So New Relic is one I use a lot. It's an application monitoring program, so it monitors WordPress, for example. It'll show you whether you're using a lot of MySQL, using a lot of PHP. It'll show you the errors. It can track down to, right down to a line of code where your problems are. I can take, what would take me 2 days to troubleshoot normally, I can do in about 10 minutes with New Relic. And it can also give you a baseline. So you see that web transaction time. You can see that, and you can see when you make changes, has that been a positive change or a negative change? So there's a really good, being able to monitor your site and get a baseline over time is really important. Keeping your software up to date is also important, and not just WordPress and your plugins, but how many people think about the infrastructure layer of your software? Anyone? Okay. I mean, these are what basically you want to keep around these versions. That's not a hard and fast rule, but I sort of did some research, and they're probably the most recent versions and most stable versions of the software. And in particular, PHP. Hands up who knows what version of PHP they're running. Okay. Hands up if it's above 7.2. So for people who upgraded from 5.6 to 7.2, there was roughly about a 40% increase in performance. And then from 7.2 to 7.3, we saw about 15%. So it's really important. There's some hosts out there, their highest version of PHP is 5.6. And a lot of times when you buy your hosting, they put you on a system. And whatever's on that system, that's what you live on till the day you change plans or change hosting. So you could be still running 4.6. You just don't know. So knowing what your PHP version is, ask your host what's the highest version you've got. And also you've got to test your website to see if it's compatible with those versions. It's really important. I did have this is an actual screenshot. I got sent to this by a friend on Facebook Messenger. And he's like, I can't update WordPress. Can you tell me why? I said, well, yeah, it says right there. Your PHP version requires 5.6 at least, and you're on 5.4.45. So it's clear as mud. So WordPress won't even update if you're an old version of PHP. And it's important to note that 7.1, well, from 5.6 and PHP 7.1 became end of life beginning of this year. So they're not receiving any patch updates or security updates. So 7.2 is like the lowest version you really want to be on at the moment.
Did you send in the email with the big red arrow?
I just said, you need to talk to your host, like now. So, I mean, if you can't update your WordPress core, then you're in real trouble. Another thing people don't think about much is the database. So one thing I found out through, that's one thing I never considered. You just load up plugins, you load up core. What database tables are you running? And in WordPress, depending on the plugins and the themes that you load, they'll create a table in either InnoDB or MyISAM. Now, there's arguments over which one's better. You can read for days on which one's better. From our experience, we found that InnoDB is much more performant because it doesn't lock down the whole table, it's got row locking, which means it's not tying up the resources as much. So converting from MyISAM to InnoDB, generally we see performance gains. And it's a very simple thing. You can run a very simple script, or your hosting company can usually do this for you. But just have a look. You can go into PHPMyAdmin and you can have a look and you can see all the different tables. If you've got really large tables in MyISAM, it's probably a good idea to change them to InnoDB. Server-side caching is another thing. Everybody's got probably caching plugins, but there's some hosts that will run the caching at the server side, which means that you'll get a much better experience because it's actually hitting the caching's happening at the infrastructure layer, not going all the way to WordPress and generating it there. Now, this was a little chart done by Joe Hoyle from Human Made, and he compared Backcache, which is an automatic caching plugin, up against the Varnish, using Varnish to serve the caching. And you can see as the load got heavier, the load speed of the site using the plugin got slower, whereas the server-side caching stayed nice and stable. So that's an important thing to remember. And also, there's always that saying that less plugins is better. So anything that your hosting environment can do that can take away a plugin is going to make your site faster. Now, one thing I found from being in a hosting environment, I started to see a lot of things in the stats when I was looking at them. And generally, there's one thing I noticed. It was about the 14th of February. There was big spikes in server usage. Wonder why. So shopping sites, membership sites, they're more server intensive because there's a lot of dynamic requests. Seasonal things like Valentine's Day, Black Friday, Click Frenzy. Census, yeah. They can create big spikes. But why is that such a problem? If anybody saw Robert Lee's talk yesterday on load testing, he kind of alluded to a lot of this stuff. But I'll do my very basic kind of introduction to why you need server resources on a shopping site. So imagine you're running a bar. You just opened up. It's very quiet. There's not many people. You've got one or two locals come in. All they want is a bottle of 4X or Tui's or a cider, or maybe pour a quick beer. Very easy. You've got one bar person. It's very easy to maintain. You think, this is all I need. I'm making money and I've got customers coming in. I really want more customers, but at the moment it's all good. But then one day, there was a big football match down the road. The home team wins, everybody's celebrating, and they come to your bar. And you want this. You want the traffic. You want people to come in and buy all your drinks. Problem is, you just got one barman. How effective is this barman going to be to serve that kind of crowd? Not very well. And what's going to happen is that bar's going to get really crowded. You're going to have somebody at the door going, look, we're absolutely full. You need to go somewhere else. So every one of those customers is going somewhere else because you can't serve them. So in the website world, in the internet world, that's the 504 error. That's basically, there's a PHP queue, and it'll say, we're going to allow 10 transactions at a time, and then from there we'll queue up another 25, and after that 25, you've got to go somewhere else. We're not going to let you come to the site because it's going to kill the site. And this is what happens. And people just, it's just a matter of not thinking, oh, we don't need it, because when it's nice and quiet, everything's running good. But what you really want is to get through this and get some traffic and make some money. So in summary, get an SSL for security and SEO, back up regularly, use staging to minimise the impact on your live site, get good support, budget for what you need, anticipate and have resources to meet demand, and keep all your software updated. And I think that pretty much sums it up. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Ricky. That was really, really helpful. I have probably what would be termed a very basic question about software update and PHP updates. Are these things that you have to request that hosts do, or are these things that they should automatically kind of update and it be available?
Good question. So generally with a good host, this is one thing when you've really got to shop around for a good host, and especially when I said about managed hosting should be doing this for you. They should be looking at your all the software that's going into making the site, doing the back end, and updating that as need be. Not so good hosts, probably, like I said, they'll put it on a box and they'll leave it there until you say something, or you might have to manually update. So if you're not sure, call your hosting. If you can do some simple checks to see what PHP version you're on. Otherwise, call your hosting company, say what version of PHP am I on, and if they say 4.2 or 5.6, say can I get upgraded to 7.2? Also, there's some plugins to check your website for WordPress to make sure that it's compatible with 7.2 or whichever. So do that. Make sure your site's, because it might be an old plugin you're using that might not be compatible. So double check that your plugin's compatible. And if it's not compatible, maybe look for an alternative or ask the plugin author if he can update it to 7.2, make it more performant and secure. But yeah, sometimes it's manual. Good hosting, you shouldn't have to worry about it. It should be just done automatically. No worries.
Hi, thank you again. Just a question would you know any scenario where a paid SSL would be preferred over a free SSL outside of like having the brand on your SSL?
Sometimes, yeah. So the free SSL is very good for the basic SSL. If you just need an SSL, other times you may need a wildcard SSL where, for example, if you've got a whole heap of a multi-site and you got a whole heap of subdomains, you might want to use a wildcards instead of putting an SSL on each one of those. And then, of course, you've got what they call the extended valuation SSL, which is what you see banks use. They're about $2,000 and manually checked. So it's not just an automatic system, it's manually checked. That's when you get that they put the name of the website into they might say National Australia Bank or whatever. But that's for, financial or some, companies who really, really want to be secure. For normal everyday, you just need that free one.
Great talk. Thanks, mate.
Oh, thank you.
Question about leaving company X that you no longer like.
Yep.
And you've got your whole website set up with them and the plugins and everything else. How do you do that? To do it neatly and to do it sort of like without making too much of a mess?
That's a good question, and any good host should just have systems in place to allow you to do that. With WordPress, it should be very easy just to do a download of your site. One of the plugins I used to use was all-in-one migration plugin. It was very easy to download a complete copy of your site, and then all you had to do is when you went to the new hosting environment, you would just create a new blank install of WordPress, install that plugin, put in drop a file in, and it would basically rebuild your site. You will have to do that one would do a lot of the search and replace for you. And you'll have to switch your DNS. So eventually when you go to a new environment, ideally what you want to do is go to a new environment, set up your new site, get everything, check that it's all working properly, then change your DNS, and then shut down the old one. Unless you can do without your site for a couple of days.
With obviously you guys, I don't think you do DNS hosting. Who do you recommend in Australia? What's the best DNS solution?
Personally, I mean, that's a loaded question, but look, honestly, I think Cloudflare is one of the best in the world at the moment at DNS hosting. They've got a really good, apparently they're like the quickest out there at the moment, and they're very cheap. In fact, that will actually work. If you're using, say, any other company that's actually you bought your domain name from, you can very easily just switch the domain management over to Cloudflare very easily. You don't have to actually go with them as such. But I mean, it's just a matter of doing your homework, finding the best solution for what your needs are. But yeah, that would be my recommendation.
These are the last couple of questions, sorry. It's food time.
You're talking about staging. Do you have any preferred staging plugins or options?
With the staging, that should be actually done at the hosting level. So the good hosts now will implement that in, so it'll be just a matter of clicking in the cPanel Plesk or the proprietary user portal system that they've got. So it should just set it up from the infrastructure layer. I don't think there's any plugins that would actually do it because it literally has to replicate the entire site. So you're going to need like a new database and everything. But the idea is that will live in a subdomain. So it won't be, so you'll have like your site be xyz.com. It will probably live in something like staging.xyz.com, and allows you to test things out away from your main site without attracting traffic, or like you just don't want to break your main site. If you've got customers coming to your main site and you want to test something out and it might break it, or you want to do an update, doing it on staging just allows that extra layer of protection.
Hi, that was really good, thank you.
Thank you.
I host my site on Studio Coast, which is not WordPress specific. Why? I know you touched on it, but why would I go to WP Engine, a specific WordPress hoster? Why would I move? I mean, these guys are great. I love them. They answer my questions, etc.
Well, that's a good question. And so, WP Engine's WordPress specific, and there's a lot of other companies who are really good. They're good WordPress specific hosts. I think the main thing is they will be WordPress specific. Other hosting environments might know a little bit about WordPress, but they're also hosting every other thing. And also, those environments are set up for everything. Whereas WordPress specific hosts will hopefully fine-tune all the infrastructure to WordPress. And they should have, like I said, at the support level, it should be incorporating WordPress as well as the infrastructure. So a lot of them will just say the infrastructure or the server is up and your website's down, so you need to find out what the problem is. With the WordPress specific hosts or the managed WordPress hosting, WordPress is part of the support. So if something goes wrong with the site, even though the server's up and the site's down, they should investigate in and help you get the site back up.
This is the last question.
In regards to the SSL, we moved ours across to that a while ago, but it was rather a painful process. Is there actually a simple way of doing it without having to actually go into the coding and doing find and replace and all those lovely, delightful things?
Yes, there is. So most of the good hosts now, it should be just a simple matter of almost clicking a couple of buttons in the back end of their system. So, you know, like from speaking from our system, it's just a matter of going in and saying, I want SSL, click a button, maybe add a few extra bits of information in, and you'll have your SSL certificate. They'll also, because it's managed, you'll have the support who'll be able to help you with that. So, and most of the good hosting companies will do that now. That's part of their service. In the traditional hosting, you had to acquire the SSL certificate, and then you had to upload it. That would help you, but it was a lot more manual and really convoluted process.